Yep.
District Deputy Commissioner Matt Dice, please. Not able to attend. Council President, Commissioner Doug Fleming. Commissioner Terry here. Councilwoman Kathy Griner. Councilwoman Lori Hammond. Councilman Ray Hickenbach.
Mayor Phil Jenkins.
Here.
District Deputy Commissioner Todd Johnson.
Here.
Mayor James Mueller. Commissioner Kevin Overmeyer. Mayor Rod Robertson.
Here.
Councilman Mark Root. Mayor Mark Center.
Yo.
Good morning, Mayor. Mayor Jeremy Stutzman.
Here.
Mayor Joseph Palmer. Commissioner Susie Wyrick.
Present.
Mayor Dave Wood.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum of members present, so we're able to conduct business. We do not have enough members present in person to allow for virtual voting, so we will just be voting in the room, which means we will not do roll call votes.
Thank you, James. That brings us to minutes for December 8th. What's the board's pleasure?
Motion to approve?
I'll second. You'll second that?
We have a motion and a second to approve minutes from December 8th. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? And those are approved. Thank you. Next is our chairman's report, and start off with our nominating committee.
Yes, good morning again. Our nominating committee, which was comprised of Commissioner Susie Wyrick, Mayor Jeremy Stutzman, and Mayor Phil Jenkins, met. They have proposed the following slate of officers. And for those members who are new, or just it's, I think, always helpful to recap, our standard operating procedure on this is that each year the chair rolls off of the MACOG Policy Board officers, and then each member, as long as they are still willing to serve, would then step into a new role. So, for example, first vice chair becomes chair, second vice chair becomes first vice chair, etc. So what we're doing here is that same procedure. So our chair for the nominating committee recommendation would be Commissioner Susie Wyrick. First vice chair would be Mayor Mark Center. Second vice chair would be Commissioner Carrie Groninger. Our secretary, this would be the new person that we would be adding to the officers, would be Mayor Dave Wood. And then our treasurer would remain Councilman Mark Root. That was the report from the nominating committee as the recommended slate of officers.
Thank you, James. And you have the slate of officers in front of us. Is there any other nominations that anybody would like to make? Hearing none, is there a motion to close nominations?
Motion to close. Second.
We have a motion and a second to close nominations. So now we are voting on our slate, which James just read to everybody, is on your green sheet. Are there any questions or comments on the slate? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve our 2022 MACOG Policy Board slate of officers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And that passes. Thank you. Can move on to our financial report, Debbie.
Good morning, everyone. Our fiscal year-to-date expenses through the month of November was $2,714,611.81. Our cash balance at the end of November was $3,377,561.65. You'll notice that there was kind of a large increase there from last month as we received the $1 million fund exchange with the Lafayette City Bus in the month of November. And our disbursements for the month of November was $615,811.90. Are there any questions? If not, I would like to ask for the board's approval of the November financial report.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the November financial report. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And that is approved. Thank you, Debbie. Next is our secretary's report. Carrie.
Yeah, just looking there, looks like we have a few December modifications there that are part of your packet. Looks like there was 4 of them. Just make sure you make note of those.
Those do not need to be voted on. Those are largely informational.
Thank you. Any questions on those? Okay, and I don't believe we have any old business today, so I'll turn it over to you for new business, James.
Yes, there is no old business today. We do have new business, and one of the first items of new business actually is a request from staff to change the agenda to add an addendum. There are a few items that have come to us after last week when we set the agenda out, which we would like to add. Largely, for those that are familiar, the state manages the State Transportation Improvement Program. In 2021, we were supposed to shift from fiscal 2020 through 2024, and we adopted as MACOG a new TIP, and the state was supposed to adopt a new STIP. That's kind of the procedure to be a new 2022 through 2026. There were certain changes in there that were needed, but the state ran into some technical difficulties with their STIP. And with those technical difficulties, they then never approved that new STIP. So we're actually still having to operate largely out of the 2020 through 2024. Because of that kind of issue that the state's having with the STIP, we're needing to do some of these resolutions, which were really reflected in that new document, not in the old document. But since we're having to play out of the old document right now, that's why we're asking to do these. And these items came to light after we sent the agenda out last week. So we would be asking to request to add the addendum, and if it is then added, we would then still present and you would vote on these items as a normal agenda item.
Is there a motion to add the addendum?
So moved.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second to add the addendum. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. So this month's amendments to our Transportation Improvement Program fall under Transportation Resolution 1-22. So we'll start with item A. This is a locally initiated project in South Bend. It's at Olive Street from Indiana Court to Tucker Drive. This is phase 2 of this road reconstruction, and we are increasing federal funding for construction by a little over $300,000. Next, we have item B. This is an NDOT-initiated project at various locations within the Fort Wayne District, specifically Route 25 east of County Road 400 West to south of County Road 200 South in Kosciuszko County. There's also another location in Huntington County, which is obviously outside of our region. But this is a high-friction surface treatment project, and we are adding in construction. And then we have another NDOT-initiated project. This is item C. It's at various locations within the Fort Wayne District. There are 11 different project locations total throughout Elkhart and Kosciuszko County. I'm happy to share that list of projects if needed. But this is a new or slotted left turn lane project, and we are adding in preliminary engineering, and construction. And then we have 2 additional items that are being added in with the addendum. Both are locally initiated projects in Mishawaka. So we have item D. It's at 12th Street from Dodge Avenue to Campbell Street. This is phase 3 of this road reconstruction, and we are adding in right-of-way. And then finally, we have item E. This is the Cedar Street Bridge on the Mishawaka Riverwalk. This is a bridge widening project, and we are adding in right-of-way. And you'll note with these 2 items added with the addendum that funding is being programmed at 100% local. And kind of as James alluded to, currently for these 2 projects, construction is the only phase that has federal funds programmed. And construction falls in fiscal years that are outside of the 20 to 24 STIP, which is the only recognized STIP currently. And we recognized at our last quarterly tracking meeting that this is causing some issues with projects. Specifically for this one, the environmental documents won't be approved until the project is added to the recognized STIP. So with that, we're adding in a right-of-way phase because it falls in fiscal year 22, which falls within the 20 to 24 STIP, which is the only recognized STIP. I'm happy to answer any questions about that or any of the other items. If there are none, I would ask for your approval of Transportation Resolution 01-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and thank you, Allison, for the report. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. Thank you.
And then the next resolution being added in with the addendum is Transit Resolution 04-22. These 4 items are being added to our TIP in state fiscal year 22. We don't currently have DUS numbers for these projects, but they have been requested and we should have those soon. But item A is for transit vehicle purchases, specifically for the purchase of 1 low-floor replacement trolley bus for the interurban trolley fixed route in Elkhart and Goshen. Item B is for transit operating, specifically to cover operating assistance used for the interurban trolley access service. Item C is for transit miscellaneous equipment, specifically to cover software expenses for the new dispatch system for the interurban trolley access service. And then item D is for transit operating, specifically to cover the capital cost of contracting that will provide funding for operations and preventative maintenance costs associated with the contract we have with Royal Excursion. I'm happy to try to answer any questions on this. If not, I would ask for your approval of Transit Resolution 4-22.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass Resolution 04-22. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And opposed? And that passes.
Okay, and then the final resolution being added in with the addendum is the Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP Resolution 5-22. These are all MACOG-sponsored projects being added to our TIP in fiscal year 22. Item A is for our regional freight mobility plan that's looking at ways to enhance freight mobility throughout our region. Our consultant is actually here for that project, who will be giving a presentation here shortly. And then item B is for a Potato Creek Trail planning and environmental linkage study. So MACOG will assist St. Joseph County with a planning study and alternatives analysis for a regional trail between Lakeville and North Liberty that would connect to the Potato Creek State Park. And this study will be funded with STBG funds, and the local funding will be provided by the county. And then item C is at County Road 52 and County Road 101 near Napanee. This is another planning and environmental linkage study. And MACOG will assist Elkhart County and the city of Napanee with a planning study and alternative analysis for a road improvement project on County Road 52 west of State Road 19, likely to County Road 3, as well as County Road 3 from County Road 52 to US 6. And again, this study will be funded with STBG funds, and the local funding will be provided by the county. I'm happy to answer any questions on these, and if there are none, I would ask for your approval of Resolution 5-22.
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to pass Resolution 0522. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Resolution 2-22 is a resolution endorsing MACOG to apply for a partnership planning grant through the Economic Development Administration. This is something we do each year, federal fiscal year. So this new fiscal year will be from April 2022 to March 2023. So we serve as the regional economic development district authorized by the Economic Development Administration. Each year we receive an invitation letter from EDA, Partnership Planning Office, to apply for their Partnership Planning Assistance Grant. With this grant award, it helps us provide technical capacities to assist you all on various long-range planning and technical studies, as well as be a conduit to help you all apply for any federal assistance that you may need to advance your infrastructure or community economic development projects. So this program is a 50-50 match program that we can apply for up to $140,000. So our local match commitment would be for $70,000, with EDA providing the other $70,000. One of the required documentation for the partnership planning grant is a signed resolution by the governing body delegating authority to the authorized organizational representative, which would be MACOG. So with this resolution, we are seeking the board's authorization for MACOG to apply for and administer the EDA grant award, as well as authorizing the executive director of MACOG as the official AOR to sign all required documentation on behalf of the board, and then also just documenting our local commitment of the $70,000 needed for this grant. Are there any questions for Resolution 2-22? If not, I ask for the board's approval of Resolution 2-22.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2-22. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That passes. Thank you, Donnie.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item is Resolution 322, which is a resolution endorsing the updated MACOG procurement manual. Just a little bit of history here. The current and existing MACOG procurement manual is, I believe, dated from 2010. So it is rather dated. It has served us well. But in our recent triennial review, which is the 3-year process audit or process review that is done by the Federal Transit Administration, there were some noted deficiencies with what was not necessarily in a written procedure within that document. There was no deficiency with any of our procurements, just that our procurement manual was dated and did not have kind of the reflected current language. And so we have gone through and made a series of updates to this procurement manual. And I'll walk you through what those updates really are and what's in the overall procurement manual as a whole. So the first is that, and these are all kind of the required elements of Federal Transit Administration's kind of minimum requirements of their procurement manual. So first, you'll see that there are 2 elements that kind of encapsulate the entire document, which is that when we do procurement, that we'll be clear and accurate in our description, and we'll identify kind of all of the required elements which offerers will need to respond to. On the next slide here, we'll see that then there are some general procurement standards that are outlined throughout the document related to oversight, standards of conduct, which was one of the missing areas where we had some language that was missing related to standards of conduct. Particularly, we have standards of conduct and we have our staff sign standard of conduct agreements each year, but nowhere in our previous policy did it say that if you violated the standards of conduct, that there could be a punishment, that you may be relieved from duty, you might be terminated, or those different kind of elements. So they were looking for that kind of language. Additionally, then, there's areas related to unnecessary and duplicative items. This was also the next item is that we will only contract with responsible contractors. That goes without saying, but we do need to actually say it, and there has to be very particular language that's in there that we articulate, and so that has now been added, as well as then just the maintenance of the written procurement history, and those kind of different items, dispute resolution, et cetera. That's all outlined in this document. If you go to the next section, these are all the other kind of items that we have made sure to include related to competition, that we promote full and open competition because of the amount of federal funds that we use that were prohibited on geographic preference, other than in certain areas kind of related to architectural and engineering and those kind of areas that are allowed under federal regulations, as well as all these additional requirements that we've made sure that are clearly outlined within that document. Most importantly, on the next slide, we've also updated our procurement methods to reflect current levels from either state or federal regulations on what our procedures are for different procurement methods. So we would modify our micro purchases to be contracts of 10,000 or less. Our small purchases would be anything from a micro purchase up to less than 150,000. There's two different levels technically within the micro or within the small purchase. There's from 10 to 49,999, and then from 50,000 to 150,000, I believe. I'll double check just to make sure that I'm accurately noting that within the meeting. Just make sure that that's accurately reflected. Yeah, 10,000 to 49,999, to then 50,000 to 150,000. The reason that is that's because of Indiana code related to kind of the 50 to 150,000 of Indiana Code 52283 requires certain timelines of 7 days, et cetera, for those kind of procurements. So that's why we've they're similar procedures, but they're both within that small purchase threshold. And then our major purchases would now be at 150,000 or above. And for those purchases, we'd use either competitive proposals or sealed bids. And then we also outline a whole series of different ways that we also make other purchases under either federal supply schedules or under cooperative purchasing contracts. And those are all outlined in the procurement methods. So I believe that's the highlight reel for the procurement manual. I'd be happy to answer any questions. What we would be looking for is an endorsement to approve that MACOG procurement manual update. I would also ask that we have to get this to FTA before January 19th to, in compliance with our closing out our triennial review. I would also ask that if there are any non-substantive changes that need to be made that are either typographical or that FTA says, hey, we really need you to tweak this verbiage to make sure that it's fully compliant, that we have that authority to make those changes outside of anything that would be substantive. If it's substantive, we would come back as it outlines in this policy that this board would approve any substantive changes. Happy to answer any questions related to the procurement manual.
like to thank James and the board for putting this together. It's a document that will guide us in our procurement process. Highly important to the FTA, and appreciate their efforts. I'd make a motion to approve based on the comments.
We have a motion and a second to approve based on James' comments. Any further discussion on the procurement procedures manual? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. Thank you.
Okay, so next up, we're going to hear a presentation for our consultant for the regional freight plan. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, Dan, so you can throw your presentation.
Perfect. All right, is that coming through on your end?
We can hear your audio. We're just getting your presentation up, so just give us 1 second.
Yep. Yep. Can you guys see my presentation? I should have shared it through the...
I think you're sharing the wrong screen. You're just sharing your screen with the Zoom meeting on it.
Okay, hold on 1 second here. New to Google Meetings, so let me try this again. How about that?
Yes, we can see that.
Perfect. All right, so wanted to thank you all for inviting me to speak to your policy board meeting today. My apologies, I could not be there in person, but I wanted to make sure we gave you this important update. So what is the regional freight mobility plan? So it's really focused on identifying ways to enhance freight mobility through transportation investments, and ultimately, we will create a series of prioritized projects, programs, and policies that will help move freight-related economic development forward in the region. And also, it's important to mention that while we're focused on improving freight mobility, we're also looking at big picture, how do we improve quality of life, that freight movement shouldn't happen at the exclusivity of everything else. So where are we today? So we started off by looking at past work. So there were 10 or 15 studies that either involved freight directly in the MACOG region or statewide, and took a look at those documents and made sure we pulled all of those key takeaways forward, so we're not reinventing the wheel and we actually build upon that work and don't just do it again. Moving forward from that, we looked at goals, objectives, and performance measures, and I believe Caitlin presented this 2 or 3 months ago. So these are really, freight objectives and performance measures that could potentially be included in the next transportation plan update. So making sure that this freight plan becomes part of that bigger document and part of MACOG's larger transportation planning effort, not just a one-off study. And then we've also been doing a significant amount of outreach. We've done a listening tour. We've held listening sessions in all 4 counties. We've done interviews with freight and economic development people, state police, other interested and relevant parties. We've been engaging with truck drivers, and that's something that's ongoing. So actually getting to talk to or reach out to folks that are actually driving the trucks, which we think is important. And then also we had an online meeting that people could go in and, at any time at their own leisure, go in and give us feedback on what's happening on the ground in the region. And so I want to talk a minute about stakeholder outreach and some of our interim results for that before we get to a lot of the traffic analysis to provide some context. So, overall, what do we hear? We heard a lot about US 30 and 31, which, being a previous Plymouth resident, I completely understand. Grade crossing blockages, which is a big problem in northern Indiana. Neighborhood issues where trucks are taking shortcuts through neighborhoods based on what their GPS is telling them to do. Workforce mobility. Obviously workforce is a popular topic these days, and making sure that transportation is available to get folks who need jobs to the jobs that are there is critically important. Similarly, looking at the sometimes the conflict or how you integrate freight and other modes. So if you have trucks and bikes or buses or people walking on various pieces of infrastructure, making sure that those things are safe and everyone is accommodated across the board. And then something we heard, especially in Marshall and Kosciuszko County, were concerns about diversions from the toll road with the toll road increase, the fee increase. And so in Elkhart County, obviously we heard grade crossing blockages. I think that's across the board. There are also some issues with unloading trucks on streets, not just in downtown areas, but also in some industrial areas, which is interesting, that needs some more looking into. US 31, even though it's not in Elkhart County, was brought up of needing to be limited access, particularly the rail crossings. US 33 congestion, trucks and bicycles, as I mentioned before. State Road 13, south of Middlebury, having narrow lanes. Same thing with a 14-foot overpass in Appanee Street. Oversized loads, particularly with the RV industry. Toll road diversions, and State Road 1719, interest in being expanded because of the RV businesses, and then US 6 being full of trucks, and then the north-south connector for 94. And so Kosciuszko County, we talked a little bit about their airport and that they'd like to lower power lines to extend the runway to invite more air cargo. Right now, a lot of the air cargo goes through South Bend Airport and Fort Wayne, and they'd like to do more of that there. They're also interested in growing rail siding opportunities for businesses. Again, grade crossing blockages, I think that's a common theme throughout the, honestly, the northern portion of the state. Integrating freight into downtowns and active transportation. US 30, the number of signals and speed and crashes. I think one of the comments were that in Kosciuszko County, they have the most signals and the most curves on US 30, and so those presents a particular problem for them, especially when you think about trucks and how long they take to start and stop. So, taking a deeper dive on that, and also the logistics growth on US 30. So we're obviously adding more trucks to US 30. State Road 15 being blocked by trains and impacted by buggies. State Road 25. That it's being slowed and blocked by deliveries, in particular because it's too narrow. And then there was some concerns about roundabouts and truck movement. Marshall County, probably the top issue I saw was that the rail crossings on US 31, that those school buses and hazmat trucks actually stop on US 31, which is obviously a safety hazard if everybody else is doing, 65, 70 miles an hour. Crashes on US 30, particularly at Oak and King, but also US 31 and State Road 10. And someone mentioned that the State Road 10 US 31 interchange was delayed by NDOT to do that Pell study. Again, with the toll road diversions, curves on State Road 10, State Road 17 bridge clearance issue, some issues with truck routes, both that some communities have them and some don't, and that they're not necessarily followed by the trucking community. There were some concerns with limited access 31 and the impact of farmers and getting equipment around, Amish community traffic, and then Argos has said they had economic development folks reach out to them, or I guess site selector folks reach out to them. And one of the things that was stopping folks from locating there was the lack of a direct trucking route. And then in St. Joe County, going back to that workforce availability, connectivity, really leveraging the air cargo facility at the airport, but also the foreign trade zone. And foreign trade zones effectively operate outside of U.S. customs territory, so you can move things back and forth between FTZs and not have to incur tariffs or anything like that to import goods. So it's a way to move things around and add value without incurring a lot of taxes. So automotive industry uses that a lot, actually. Work zone communication, knowing when construction is coming, knowing when road closures are coming. Again, toll road diversion, congestion, e-commerce deliveries, bypass, the US 20 bypass. They were particularly interested in the winter weather impacts and clearance of those impacts. Also mentioned the US 31 Adams Road interchange was needed. and that US 31 near the toll road was a potential logistics area, and the Indiana Enterprise Center suggested building a interchange with the toll road near their facility. And so I tell you all of that to provide some context for a lot of really technical analysis we've done. And so we've also, before we move on, we've also have an interactive map on that online meeting that I mentioned earlier, where folks can go in and actually physically enter where they've had issues. So we have about 60 or 70 individual comments about specific areas that will feed into, or that fed into the analysis I'm going to talk about, and then also the prioritization task that comes after this. And so we looked at developing a freight profile, and it really focuses on three things. One, the economy. Two, freight system performance. Then also, what does freight look like in the future? And so I'll start with the economic profile. So something really unique about this area is that 64% of jobs are in freight-dependent industries, which is on one hand, great that those manufacturing and freight facilities are there, but also is a potential liability when it comes to so many jobs being dedicated into one area. So it's important to not just focus on the diversity of the economy, and I know you all are working on that through some of your EDA efforts, but also that we're paying really close attention to supporting those freight industries and those jobs and the transportation that supports those facilities. So freight is incredibly important to the region. In most places I work, that number is usually 20 or 30%. So 64% is a big number. Location quotient. So location quotient is a fancy way to see if industrial activities, commercial activities in your region have more or less activity than you would expect. So if you have a location quotient over 1, then economists think that you're bringing in new dollars, so you're producing equipment, producing goods that go somewhere else. So that's like a net benefit for your area. And so something that jumped out to us is that motor vehicle body and trailer manufacturing has 96 times the national average when you think about employment, which obviously makes sense with the RV industry, but again, just huge numbers. And then the freight system profile. So this is more looking at surface transportation modes, and these are all modes from road to rail to pipeline to maritime. So this is kind of just a snapshot of what it looks like big picture. So we took a deep dive and looked at truck volumes, and obviously the heaviest truck volumes are up on the toll road and US 30 and 31, and then over in Goshen and on US 20. So nothing really surprising there. The really interesting number when you look at truck percentages, and something we ran down, was that the truck percentage number on the toll road, and honestly US 30 is really high. And so the toll road's partly due to their allowance of triple trailers, and the way the toll road works is between Portage and the Ohio state line, it's more of a freight highway, and between Portage and the Illinois state line, it's more of a commuter road. And so while those numbers are pretty big, they're also not surprising at the same time. But definitely the numbers down on US 30 and 31 definitely support some of those folks looking for a solution to issues down there, but also there's some large numbers up by the airport. Bridge clearances, so we always look to see where bridge strikes could happen. So where on the main network, where can trucks successfully navigate? And the places we found, particularly in downtown South Bend, if you look at the inset map, we're pretty urban places, but there are also places where railroad bridges crossed over roadways. So sometimes those problems are more difficult to solve, and that might be why they're still there, but we'll come up with some recommendations on how to deal with that in our subsequent task. Bridge condition, only one bridge popped out at us, and that was at Mayflower Road and Adamore Trail, I'm sorry. So overall, bridge conditions pretty good in the region. I also wanted to share two maps. So this is congestion versus reliability. So there's congestion is things that happen every day. It happens, if you're driving to work at 8 o'clock, you expect there to be a congestion, on, US 31 at X Street. Reliability is a bit different, and reliability is more important to the trucking community. So congestion you can plan for. So if you know that if you leave at 7 o'clock, you're going to wait for 15 minutes somewhere. So you adjust your time, or you're going to sit in traffic. When it comes to reliability, this is how reliable a facility is. So is it going to take me 2 hours to drive to Chicago, or is it going to take me 4 hours to drive to Chicago? And that uncertainty is much more important to the trucking community because it costs them dollars because they can't plan for it. So a lot of times they have unuseful time if they've left early to avoid an unreliable facility. So if you look at congestion, most of this doesn't really surprise me. Obviously US 30 west of Plymouth and Warsaw, where all those stoplights are, but also up in Goshen on US 33 and in and around South Bend. Reliability, a lot of the same places pop, but if you look at north of Goshen, there's some differences both on the toll road, but also on State Road 120. So, minor differences, but it's important to look at both aspects. A lot of times you only think about congestion, but reliability is actually more important when it comes to freight. So crashes, obviously safety is always a number one consideration. The highest concentration of truck crashes, so all these dots are truck crashes only, is at the toll road in US 31 and then US 31 and 20 South. And so those two incident maps below show you exactly where those crashes are taking place. And this will be a key part of our prioritization to try to solve some of those issues. Workforce mobility. So I mentioned earlier that it's important to think about the quality of life and making sure you can get folks to the jobs they need. And so we took a look at the InfoUSA data set that MACOG has, where we can look at establishment level data. So each of these dots are what we're calling a freight employment cluster. So what we did was we mapped all of those clusters and looked at, well, where are the bike and ped trails and routes, and where are the transit routes, and how many of those facilities are supported. So it's an interesting look at what's happening on the ground and people's ability to get to where they need to go. I think probably the largest freight employment cluster, if you look on the map, is west of Elkhart. And there's some transit lines and some bike and ped lines, bike and ped routes, but that's something I think we're going to take a deeper dive into going forward. Also, out near the airport, making sure that some of those jobs and some of those future jobs can be supported by transit. The railroad, so this is a popular topic both for outreach results, but also just looking at the data. There's several very busy rail lines that both tend to have, I believe, 50 plus trains a day going east to west, but at times they also like to stop outside of Goshen and on the main line to Chicago. And so we took a look at where these rail lines are, what their maximum train speeds are, and where are those grade crossing crashes happening. And I wanted to note too that one of the subtasks in our prioritization effort is looking at how to prioritize different crossings when it comes to grade separations and things like that. So this is something we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at, but this is only the first step. Air cargo. So this is South Bend International Airport. So almost all FedEx freight leaves and goes to Memphis, which is their national air cargo hub, or I guess their national air cargo hub. Almost all the inbound freight is coming from Fort Wayne. So you'll have a plane come from Fort Wayne and drop some stuff off, and they put it on the bigger plane and send it to Memphis. And nearly all UPS traffic is outbound through Fort Wayne, but also going to Louisville, where their major hub is. So air cargo isn't just hub to spoke, but there's also often 3 or 4 hops before it goes back to the central hub. So the relationship with Fort Wayne here, especially with the medtech industry in Kosciuszko County, is really important. Pipelines. And so pipelines are harder nut to crack. States and MPOs don't have a lot of authority over pipelines, but it's important to know they're there and important to look at the connectivity between the highway mode and pipelines. So these are the pipelines in the area and the transfer points, but I wanted to call out 2 of the major pipelines. One is a 8-inch pipeline that moves fuel between Chicago and South Bend and Elkhart, but also the 12-inch line that runs between the Whiting refinery to Detroit, but also has a terminal over in Granger. So again, can't do a whole lot with the pipelines, but we can look at how local roads and trucks interact with that. So really focused on connectivity and being aware of this from a big picture standpoint. Maritime. And so while the Port of Indiana Burns Harbor isn't in the MACOG region, it definitely serves the MACOG region. So it's important to recognize that they're there and look at connectivity between the port and the region. So looking at US 20 and 12 and making sure that those corridors can handle the weight and the size of goods coming out of that port. And port traffic is growing at Burns Harbor, and they're doing a lot of neat and innovative things. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on. And while it's technically outside of the region, it's definitely a big part of the freight picture. So a future freight forecast. And so this is where I get to nerd out a little bit. And so we looked at the current vehicle to capacity ratio in the MACOG region. So the goal here is to look into the future and see where are potential problems in the future for freight. And so we looked at the existing conditions, and then we went and looked at the freight analysis framework, which is something that's created by Federal Highway that shows commodity flows across the country, and they do a forecast out several years. And so, but the issue with the freight analysis forecast framework is that South Bend, Elkhart, Plymouth and Warsaw areas are all looped into this zone called the rest of Indiana, which is everything that's not Indianapolis or Northwest Indiana. So it's a bit challenging to, especially when we have 64% employment in this region, to say, hey, we're going to use this number from the rest of Indiana. So what we did was we took a deeper dive into numbers underneath their forecast and inflated their forecast to be somewhat equal to what we're seeing on the ground now in the region. So it's a bit tailored, but I think it shows a better picture. And so this is the math behind, that inflation factor. So this is using the FAF information and then also inflating it to what we're seeing on the ground today. And then we produced a forecast out into 2045 at what the VC ratio would be in the region then. And this includes all vehicles. You can't just do a vehicle to capacity ratio for trucks, right? Because there's cars and other things on the roads. And so with that inflated truck factor, this is what happens in 2045. So you obviously see more red. And so when we looked into it and zoomed into areas, some things jumped out at us. Both most of them are intersection issues. Looking at the north segment of the intersection at State Road 13 and Warren Street, the west portion of US 23 and Grape Road, the east segment of US 31 and Ireland Road, the west segment of US 20 and JD Road, which is west of Elkhart, and then the west segment of the intersection at US 20 and Maplehurst Avenue. And so some interesting things to look at, and if we're putting together an MTP a transportation plan in the future, What are those freight corridors we need to be looking at to strategically invest to avoid some of these issues? But it's also important to recognize there are a lot of larger future trends happening, right? So e-commerce, obviously, with COVID has taken off, and so has omni-channel sales. And so omni-channel sales is effectively how Target is operating today, where you can go into the store or you can order online and go pick it up at the curb, or they can deliver things to your house. So there's multiple channels to have those sales. So those things, obviously, whether it's going direct to consumer or if you're going to a store to pick it up, changes the way the distribution network works and how things ultimately end up at your house or at the store. The future of manufacturing is also really important, especially given 64% of employment in your region is responsible for freight-dependent industries, which are largely manufacturing. Alternative fuels, the impacts of electric trucks and, something we probably have not even thought about yet, but, different fuel sources. Changing freight vehicles, it's not just 53-foot trucks making deliveries now, it's vans and cars, and how do we integrate that? But also, in the past few years, you've lived this firsthand of the rail industry can make changes and fundamentally change the impacts to your community. So the change to precision railroading led to much longer trains and many more stop trains at your grade crossing. So decisions made somewhere else can dramatically impact your area. And so next steps over the short term, we're going to be turning a formal document over to MACOG staff for their review. And then we're going to begin a needs assessment, which is taking all this really great information we've gathered and turning it into something that tells a story and identifies or creates some good tools that can be used to share that freight story. And then ultimately, we're going to create a prioritization of all of the freight needs in the region and looking at policies and programs. So now that we've learned all this great stuff, what can MACOG do with that, and what can communities do with that, and how do we integrate that into the next transportation plan? So with that, turn it over for any questions, and wanted to thank James and Allison again for inviting me to speak today.
I have a question. I'm sure you're aware that Amazon's building a huge facility in Elkhart.
Yep.
Did you factor some of that into some of your studies? Are you starting to look at that? Because I anticipate, from what I understand, it's about a 4 million square foot building. It's going to be huge volumes of tractor trailer traffic going in there. But has that been factored into this as we look at the future? Because I believe they're going to be operational a year from now.
Yeah.
It's what their plan is.
It's a challenge, right? So that 2045 forecast is using like very large numbers, right, to do the forecast. But I think looking at those, individual facilities, same down on US 30 in Kosciuszko County, those, there's gonna be a ton of delivery vans, a ton of 53-foot trucks. And so I think that's definitely going to be a big part, I think, of the recommendations in the study as to, how do you deal with that ongoing? Because it's not going to be the last big Amazon project as they move forward with going into 2-hour deliveries and 1-hour deliveries and making that more of a thing, or even same-day deliveries. They have to build more warehouses to cover more geography, right? And they actually do that reliability calculation that I showed you earlier, where they can reach 98% of the people in this area around you. So it's not going to be the first or the last Amazon warehouse or whatever comes after Amazon, right? Because if we're looking 30, 40 years ahead, is Amazon still going to be here? Probably, but things could look very different. So I think that's a key part of those recommendations, and making sure not just the transportation folks, but the land use folks are also informed about those impacts, because often those decisions get made, in their own separate fiefdoms.
Okay.
Dan? Hi, Dan. This is Rod Robertson in Elkhart. Hey, we've been working on automated relationships with freight with a couple of different initiatives that we have going on right now. As a matter of fact, as a part of our Ready app. And I'd like to know how we enter that discussion around this needs assessment, or how we link some of the initiatives that we've already put in I guess in broad strokes, if you will, into hopefully helping to validate some of that through the assessment itself.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking more truck platooning, or are you talking more just automated freight?
Truck and rail.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely, especially on the truck side of things, I think there's a lot of opinions out there on truck platooning, and there's been like some examples where Federal Highways went out and linked some trucks on I-66 outside of DC, and it works. But there's a lot of questions about insurance and liability and things like that, and I think it's a big part of that future conversation, right? Because if you're going to be doing truck platooning, the toll road number one, because they're catering to trucks, right? And they have more ability to do things versus a road that's paid for with gas tax dollars. US 30 and 31, I think, would be key corridors, especially 30, because you can drive across several states in limited access as you go into Ohio. So I think that's a big part of that future conversation. And, while you can't necessarily tweak the forecast to cover that, but you can talk about it, contextually of, this is something we need to be prepared for. And here's what some other places are doing, and here's what we could potentially do in the future.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dan, thanks for being here and being able to provide an update. As Dan mentioned, kind of our next steps moving forward is you'll be hearing more as we wrap up that kind of profile section. But then that next phase that we're really going to be jumping into is trying to figure out recommendations and implementation and what all of that looks like. So over the next few months, we'll be working on that. So please expect to hear more. As all of you know from your local communities, from the region, freight is an extremely important topic on many of the roadways that go through or around our communities. So that's why we've kind of launched into this to get a better updated set of recommendations, as well as just a better kind of feel and understanding around some of our opportunities and challenges with freight. So Dan, thanks for being here. We'll move over to the rest of the staff update.
And just one final note on that, I wanted to mention, next Tuesday, we will be hosting kind of an extension of Marshall County's listening session in Plymouth. So if you can attend that and would like to provide some insight after hearing this presentation, that would be greatly appreciated. I believe it's at 1 p.m., but I'm happy to share information on that. Thank you.
All right. At the end of December, or towards the end of December, we have had a number of open positions that we have been able to fill, and we have 2 new employees who are here with us today. First is Sophia, and Sophia will introduce herself in a second, but you may recognize Sophia because Sophia has been interning with us for the last, how long has it been now, Sophia?
Started in June.
Okay, started in June. So we have been able to extend an offer and bring Sophia on full-time as a community development planner. So Sophia, please introduce yourself and say a few words.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So as James has said, I've been sitting in on these meetings for some time as an intern. I'm very excited to share that I recently graduated last month and have accepted a community development planning position here at MACOG. And I'm really excited to continue to work with your communities and continue to get to know them. Thank you so much for your time.
Additionally, we brought on Dustin New as our active transportation planner. Dustin's from the area, and you might know him as he is pretty active in the walking and biking community. So, Dustin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, many of you may have seen me articles and news things about the South Bend Bike Garage. I'm the president of that, as well as out on a bike quite a bit. So yeah, I'm looking forward to also getting to know you guys and working within your communities and quite honestly, riding your trails.
So those are two new staff members who have come on board in December. So you'll be seeing more of them in the coming months. Next, we'll have some grant and funding updates. So I'll turn it over to Allison.
Yep, just a few grant updates. We'll keep them quick. I wanted to remind you guys that the Community Crossings Matching Grant opened January 3rd, and it closes at the end of the month on January 28th. This grant is available for the construction phase of road and bridge projects, as well as specific ADA curb ramp and sidewalk work. If you have any questions about this, need help with your application, need crash data, anything, we are here to help, so please feel free to reach out to myself.
And to jump right into things that are involving me, this grant application is due in about a week, specifically the 20th. Those communities that don't already have a bike and pedestrian master plan, this is a great opportunity. No matching funds required for you for the smaller communities. So great opportunity to get that piece in place so that future grant opportunities can be available to you.
And then the final item within the grants, you'll remember back in November, NDOT hosted a roll call for projects. We assisted 7 communities in our region for applying for that. All 7 applications were accepted for consideration. So now the next phase is each of these communities will need to give a short presentation to NDOT about the projects they applied for. Communities in the LaPorte district will be presenting next Tuesday, the 18th, and then communities in the Fort Wayne district will be presenting February 1st. So we've been actively helping communities with this, but hopefully we'll have some good news to report back in the next couple months.
Last but not least, on the official staff update items, Connect. Want to make sure that everyone is aware Connect is going to be our regional transit plan. You'll be seeing a number of announcements come out in January around that planning process really launching to the public. In the past few months, you have heard presentations from our consultant there, which is Jarrett Walker and Associates, which is kind of a nationally renowned transit planning firm. This plan, Connect, will be focused on the transit systems here in the Transpo system, as well as the interurban trolley system, and how those systems work or don't work, where there are opportunities to improve, and just where there is unmet demand and kind of innovative opportunities for public transit. So we want you all to be aware of that. We want you all to be engaged in that and to help us with engagement. So just as those announcements are coming up, we'll make you aware. Additionally, if you're on any councils or commissioners, boards where you feel as though it would be helpful to do a presentation to make sure that your fellow council members or your fellow commissioners are aware of this study, please connect with us on that, and we would be happy to connect with them. So the other item that I just want to point out, today is a bid letting day for NDOT. So we are excited because there are 3 local projects that will be letting. Coal Line Phase 2 in the city of South Bend. Winona Lake will have its Argonne Road roundabout. And then the city of Plymouth will have its PED bridge, the pedestrian bridge that will be going to letting. So hopefully later today we'll be seeing those prices, and excited about those projects moving towards construction later this year. So with that, that is all the official staff updates that we had for today.
Thank you, James. That brings us to privilege of the floor. Is there anything anybody wanted to bring to the board that was not on the agenda?
I would.
Yes.
Just curious, I guess I should ask this under the Connect thing, I don't know, but for those that aren't aware, somewhat surprising to at least me was the license branch moving out of downtown Elkhart to the north part of town, which I don't believe is currently served by our transit system. And I want to see if there's anything that can be done quickly to get that part of the of the transit loop to serve the community?
Sure. So in that instance, I'm pleased to report that we're very close to that location already. So, like all of our local governments, we were not informed of that decision until it was press released that they were moving out of downtown.
Yeah, well, the decision I heard was when they had the ribbon cutting.
Yeah, the ribbon cutting,
I
yeah.
mean, it was-
That's pretty much when we found out as well. So there was no advanced planning. We were just having to be reactive because of when we were told. But our blue line that originates out of downtown and heads north towards the shops on 6 and that whole area, it had always served the Kmart that used to be in that plaza. When it was no longer a Kmart, I believe it became a Tractor Supply, and then kind of those changes from there. When it changed from being a Kmart, we pulled back out of that plaza a little bit, but we're actually right by that intersection where the Hampton Inn is located. So we are not far from that location. So we're actually servicing that area. It's not to the door, but it is within walking distance. So what we're going to do is monitor the progress around ridership and then see if we need to modify to go a little bit closer to the door or not. But as of right now, we're at least adjacent to the area.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
that was on the radar because
Yeah.
it was kind of an abrupt change.
It was.
And want to make sure our community was served with that.
Yeah. So right now, we are pleased at least that it is not completely off of public transit. It is still on our blue line. It might not be the most convenient. There is a small walk involved, but we'll monitor that and see if that needs to
Good.
change.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything? Okay. And did we have any public comments today?
No, we did not have any public comments online. We did not receive any in advance, and I don't believe we see any in person.
Thank you, James. I'd just like to, I think this is my last meeting. I'd like to thank the board and the staff for allowing me to be part of the executive team for the last 4 years, and I just really enjoyed getting to know everybody and getting to see things from this side. So appreciate your time and support. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.